One of the most important conclusions, concordant with the realization that ours is an embodied mind, is the idea that philosophy is, in some sense, about psychology. Now, granted, it's very different in its approach to this subject matter than psychology, because psychology takes this view, this so-called objective view, right? It looks at psychological, at psyches external to our own, other people's psyches, other people's systems. Whereas philosophy looks at those phenomena as the system, from the system's point of view. So that makes it very different studies, right? But we have misunderstood the difference and thought, oh, these ideas, they're metaphysical, they're not physical. We experience the virtual reality experience of imagination as non-physical. We called it non-physical. We were willing to say that it was some metaphysical space, basically some space that no physical thing can touch or interact with, that we somehow touch or interact with. And this seemed acceptable because it just meant that we must have one of these untouchable parts. But how did the untouchable part ever touch the touchable part? And if it did, then the untouchable part wouldn't be touched. So it doesn't really work out too well. So these studies remain separate, but what we have to realize then is when we invent or discover a form like causation, and perhaps we can't think at first how this abstraction relates to perceptions, and so we want to say, well, maybe it doesn't relate at all, then we have, a sanity check. Because with the embodied mind, everything has to have a material explanation, right? So if something like causation does relate to a so-called external world, when we get to the point where we can define that, then great. But that external thing still isn't physically in our head, right? Hopefully. So it's still a fact that all we consider is this internal model that we have created. Okay, so we are studying ideas as ideas and not metaphysical entities, but material embodied ideas that take place in a physical brain. And it's really easy to forget that when we're doing our reasoning. This is the kind of thing that is, it's not explosively reactive, but in the chemical model is very reactive. This is like a solvent that applies itself to really any thought that you've had. There's really no more important thought to get so intuitively natural in yourself besides this thought. All right, you need this so intuitive that every time you have a thought, you consider how this impacts it. Now, if you don't do that, I'm not saying your life is going to collapse. I'm just going to say that you can't really do the analysis at the forefront of philosophy, because this is the realization we're in. We are studying psychology from the inside. That's what philosophy is. We think we're studying truth, but we're studying how people think. Now, if people thought a lot of truths, or ever even one truth, then we'd be studying truth. Okay, and that's probably how we made that mistake of thinking that, is thinking that parts of those conditional were true or true enough. But the fact is, we're studying how people think. They don't think pure truth. They don't even think that much truth. And in terms of absolute truth, it's impossible to think that. So we're studying, instead of truth, we're studying how people think. And truth comes into it because we would like to have true knowledge and in that sense generate truth. But it turns out that the idea of truth that we might generate in that sense, it comes from this other idea that invoked the metaphysical worlds and stuff. And we can't really, in an embodied mind, have something literally called truth. Truth has to be just a poetic word that means something else, technically, that's broken down somewhere else, technically. And I believe it breaks down into honesty. You can't have truth, but you can't have honesty. Okay. Now, nothing is perfect, so you can't have pure honesty. But you can't even really define truth, okay, except for in terms of honesty. So we really have honesty, which is the main criteria in the embodied mind for judging a truth correspondent. Does the statement correspond with the perceptions? If it does, it's honest. If I say there's a little old lady sitting in that chair and I'm being honest, then there's a truth quality to my statement, even if she's not there. I might need more information, or another person rather, might need more information than I'm going to give them, like they need to look with their own eyes. And the superset might prove that I am wrong. But I'm not lying, and for me, there is a little old lady there every time I look. Now, it's not a physical little old lady, and you could take me over there and probably show me that I couldn't touch her, or depending on how insane I am, probably at some point I too would get some information, realize, oh wait, it wasn't really there, I'm having an hallucination. But if I'm reporting honestly the information that I get, then there's going to be some sort of truth value in what I've said. It's just incomplete information. And that's how we define, honest truth in the social context. And it's like an example in that essay I just read, where if you were to dream 12 hours every night of another life, and when you fell asleep, it was like you're waking up there. It was just as consistent and just as convincing, and you knew and were going to have that dream every night. The things that happened in that dream would be true for you. If you were having some sort of a relationship, good or bad, story in this sleeping life, you would say, hey, I had a relationship with this guy or with this person, and you would be telling the truth. All right, so the fact that those dreams break down is not truth for someone else, that's because that other person has all this other information. And even the dreamer can have this information and realize, oh, hey, when you dream, you go to a different place, and, therefore I can see how that's not true for you, but it would still be true for the dreamer. All right. These things come out of this psychological view. Now, we don't lose our connection to the material universe. It's just that we suddenly have to take it as a psychological question. How, as a psychological creature, do we determine which perceptions are facts? Which perceptions come from perceptions or perceptual sources that we want to rely on? Can we tell the difference? And how can we? And the simple answer for a lot of people, it is just, well, it comes from the senses. But that's not true. You look at a cloud and you see a face in the cloud. It all appears to come from your senses. This might be a good indicator. No doubt a lot of animals use that. But I think humans require more checking than that. There are other ways besides checking what feels like it's the source. There's also consistency, that it's checkable. And we get a consensus opinion from a group, not because we need other agents per se, but because this is a way to amplify the amount of information. By trusting other agents, information from other agents, we amplify the information we can use. And so this becomes a way to double check. So I'm going to talk more about philosophy as psychology and internet communication as psychological analysis and study.